Women are listening to 3 times more podcasts today in 2025 than they have ever been in comparison to 2015. And so if you are a podcaster who speaks directly to women, you definitely need to listen to this podcast episode because I'm going to break down some of the most recent data from Edison Research that talks about how women are consuming podcasts, what are they looking for, and if you are a podcast host, how you can use this strategically to grow your audience. I'm an Xavier. I'm the founder of the Podcast Space. I am a podcast marketer and strategist. And I have in this episode with me a friend, Yesenia Bocanegra. She is a wonderful YouTube and video podcast coach and strategist. And so I thought, why not break down, make sense of the data in a way that feels more exciting so that you can take away a lot of these. I'm going to let you know that this podcast episode is going to be in audio format, but we're doing a video episode. There's so much data, so I want to make sure that you know that you'll have a link directly to the report if you want to have it on the side. Some of you have said that you actually listen to the podcast with notes. You're sitting down taking notes. So yes, love that. So let's dive into this week's episode of the Podcast Space. All right, Yesenia, welcome to the show. I am very excited to have you on the show, especially because we're both experimenting with a new format. Hey.
Hi. Thank you for having me again.
Yes, we haven't had you in the show for a while, so I'm always excited to have you, and I'm glad that you also accepted the challenge to do this with me.
Yes.
Both of us also speak to women, and a lot of our content is directly to women. We work with a lot of female leaders, and so we're going to be sharing some of our insights, some of these data, and some takeaways that you definitely need to consider. And at the very end of the episode, Yesenia is also going to share some of our main takeaways, actions that you can take with all of this information, because we don't want the listeners to feel overwhelmed. We want them to feel empowered with this info. So are you excited to dive into the data with me?
Yes, let's do this.
Awesome. Okay. This study was conducted by over 2,500 women. And here in the US, again, wherever you are, it may be different. I want to also make sure that you know that you always can ask audience questions. You should be talking to your audience a little more to understand if some of this resonates with them or if it's slightly different. And it was a study done by Edison Research and SiriusXM. Let's get into this information. So again, if you're like, okay, what does this mean? What was the percentage of women listening to podcasts in 2015? 15%. It's not a lot. But now 45% say that they listen to podcasts in the last month, which I love it. It's pretty good. I think it's important to think about. There's the women who say, yep, I've listened to a podcast episode, and the women who go, oh, I am a consumer of podcasts consistently. And so just keep in mind that sometimes we may make some variations. So it has tripled. Awesome news. I want to help people think about, and a lot of your clients probably say this. They go, oh my gosh, there's so many podcasts. Everybody's starting a podcast. Does it still make sense for me to launch one or to relaunch if I have a season? Do you get a lot of that question? Because I think that thinking about this number that we're just talking about, like an estimated 60 million of US women who listen to podcasts, it's a lot of people. That's a lot. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. It's a lot of people. And this is just accounting the US, like you mentioned. So it's definitely worth it because there's just different perspective that you can approach even just one single same topic. If you're in a different country outside of the US, there's definitely lots of demand, and it's a pretty much an open market to start creating content for your audience. So having this data here, I think is really useful because it gives a little bit of a sense of how things are happening and how it could potentially be for you as well.
Yeah, and most people are going to have an audience that is not specifically to one country. Like even if you have a local podcast, you're going to find that there's people listening because they found your podcast. Like, oh, I don't know why I just listen to these random podcasts. So there's room for people from other parts of the world as well to consume your podcast. Plus, there's only less than 300,000 active podcasts or consistently releasing content. So it's not a lot. There's a lot of options. So do you want to talk about this graph here?
Sure. Wait, I need to zoom in a little bit. My glasses are not working great.
Eyes are broken.
Yeah.
Looking through these next slide, we're talking about how women consume podcasts on a monthly basis. And I thought that was interesting that they made the differentiation between the listen to a podcast, watched a podcast, or overall considered consumed a podcast. And the listen to a podcast still came out above. So 45% of women say that they listen to a podcast. 33 watched podcast, and then 52 overall say that they consume a podcast. You just came back from podcast movement and everybody was like, video podcasting. So looking through this data, what does this mean to you?
First of all, I love the fact that there are more people watching podcasts, and this is consistent with data overall, even from less than a year ago, that there are people consuming more podcasts in general and also in video. But the fact that audio is still top, that means that although video is rising and there's a lot of talk about it, audio podcasts are still strong. So if you're considering in launching a podcast and you're undecided if it's video or audio, video is still strong. So go for it.
Yeah. And I think that also like that idea that you can still use YouTube as just an audio only medium, I think it's still important to consider that a lot of people have YouTube running as a medium. And we're going to talk about which platforms they're using, which devices they're using to consume podcasts. And so there's a lot of people who have YouTube running in the background, but they're not really paying attention. Right. That's definitely like a blue ocean strategy. And you have some really cool data. I'm going to make sure that I have your guide, because you have a guide to optimize their YouTube profile. So yes, to help our listeners if they want to definitely get their podcast on YouTube there. All right, so let's talk about who are these women who are listening and engaging. All right, podcast consumers, they identify as women. 39% are between the ages of 18 to 34. So still very young. That's the highest percentage. I think it's really interesting that we're getting to basically more and more people are getting used to podcasting.
And 29% have a household income of 100K or more. And this is also a reminder as it's US women 18 or plus.
Yes, and which that means a lot of disposable income that women have to spend in products or services that we also will touch at the end of the study. But I think that, again, if you have products and services, talk about them. Like people are wanting to buy from you. And then 51% have a college degree. They're highly educated and they have disposable income. That's something that we know overall from podcast audiences versus traditional media. So that's a winning point for advertisers as well.
29% also are parent or guardian of a child under the age of 18. And I think this speaks a lot to going back to the fact that audio is still strong. If you are a busy parent, then you probably may not have enough time to sit down and look at a video podcast. So that's where audio podcasts are still very strong because it can benefit this particular group of women who are parent or guardians. If your audience is female and you're also targeting that mother, parent, family type of topics, I think this is something to consider if you're undecided, if you feel that you need to go into video or if you just want to start. So this is a really good data point.
Yes. And again, co-listening, we're going to be talking a little bit more. I just blank statement. We're going to be talking about a lot of things on this episode, but we're going to break a bit more of this. But I thought it was really interesting. 95% say that they worry about the economy. Who doesn't?
Especially nowadays.
Yes. So it's a key to lean into the current matters of what's going on. Also not making assumptions, but leaning in and asking and having those conversations with your listeners to make them aware that you are plugged in, you know, they are plugged in. And so you can all each other be in the same bandwagon.
Absolutely. And then 82% indicated that they worry about future of women's rights. And I think this is also tied into, we just recently finished the US election, a presidential election last November. So there was a lot of talk about podcasting and the role podcasting played in the final weeks of the election. So definitely something that's worth noting if that's a topic that you're interested in creating content for or that you currently do.
Yeah, and there was a lot of the conversations about how the election truly happened in podcasting sphere, right? A lot of people were talking about like the strategy of one side and to the other, and how, and again, if a presidential election leans into podcasting, I think everybody should be listening. Yes. Okay, like it has a lot of weight. All right, so let's talk about the devices used to listen to or watch podcasts and like our takes on this.
So pretty much almost everybody is using smartphones or tablets to consume their content. And at number 2 comes in smart TVs. And this is very interesting because I don't know if you know that YouTube has been doing a lot of updates and improvements to the platform, not just to attract more podcast creators, but also podcast consumers. And then they're creating different things within the platform so that people stay longer engaging within the platform. So one of these experiences are the living room experiences, and just the fact that you have more connected experiences within YouTube to consume content. And if you are one of those that are thinking of creating content for video specifically, and that you think that your content can really benefit from moving into video format, then knowing that there's more consumption on smart TVs, that really opens up an opportunity for you to explore video, but also look at into, if you're already creating video, what can you do to make sure that you are providing your audience an even better experience?
Yes. And then the next one was a computer and laptop, which makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, my dog was barking.
Okay. So now I'm taking over because Yesenia's dogs are having Barkfest. So basically, we're looking next to computer and laptops and then smart speaker. Computer and laptop makes sense because a lot of people are consuming podcasts at work, and that's one of the places that they're spending the most time listening to podcasts. So it makes sense that is like the third place. And again, thinking about the user experience, are you having links on all of these devices? Could you improve, make an audit into what's going on, and how can listeners click on your stuff? Is it just a block of text to when the show notes is, or are you creating a more like appealing experience when it's time to read, resources you want them to listen to, the next episode, all of that? I don't know if the dogs are quiet. No.
They're still doing their podcast.
Oh my God. Okay, I'll take over this one. You just let me know when it's quiet. This episode's going to have so many cuts because just everything's going on. So, when people go, oh, how long should my podcast be? And you normally, as an expert, both you and I go, it depends. But like, how long are women listening to? I thought it was interesting that is 20 minutes on average per day.
Yeah, and that actually makes sense because consider like the average commute time from point A to point B. One thing that is worth mentioning is that on average, U.S. women podcast consumers, so this is not just casually listening to a podcast, that are age 18 or plus or more, they're consuming 1 hour 40 minutes of podcasts typically in a day. So from 20 minutes to an hour 40, that's a big impact. That means that the people that are listening to podcasts, this is just even on a casual note, or really podcast consumers, they're engaged because 20 minutes, it's a long time. It's real estate. So that means that women are consuming these podcasts are very much engaged with the content. So how long should your podcast be? This is a good data point.
Yeah. And again, we're going to look into like how many genres a woman normally listens to. So that's going to be interesting because again, they're not consuming just the same type of content. It varies. But as the host, as the creator, you really need to be intentional to your point. What are you putting out there? Because there's a difference between having chit chat and having strategic content. And like those need to be taken into two separate buckets. I feel like big misconception that like, okay, you and I are having a conversation about this, but we're still very much focused on making sure that this is solid advice, that there's takeaways. We're not like going, okay, Yesenia, what are your dogs doing today? We're not chit-chatting. Like we're making the listener's time like worthwhile, besides this one ranting that I'm going for. Again, just make your episodes tight. All right, let's talk about like what they want and why are they listening. Do you want to talk about these numbers?
Sure. So 79% of US women monthly podcast consumers say that it's important that podcasts they listen to or watch have hosts that they enjoy. And 72% are saying that it's important that podcasts they listen to or watch to are relatable. It speaks to the fact that podcast is one of the many ways that we can consume content for entertainment in multiple forms.
And again, leaning into what makes you unique as a host, I think it's really important. And another study that actually SiriusXM did with, what was it? Signal Hill, they actually talked about how over 50% of people follow their favorite host on social media. So there's really a need to seek out individual, unique perspectives. And so when we're talking about primary motivations, why are women in the US listening to podcasts? Over 50% say that they want to dive deeper into topics, they want to learn, and they want to be entertained. So again, think about these three, diving deeper into topics. So breaking down like exactly what we're doing on this episode. Learning, and then entertainment. I think it's really important to consider like asking yourself that. And then Yesenia, what are the secondary motivations?
And then 35% say that they are consuming podcast content because of the unique perspectives that it might offer. And also 35% say that staying entertained during mundane tasks is the main reason to consume podcasts. So maybe you're cleaning and you want to get entertained and multitask that way, go ahead.
Yes, the good old multitasking, like a high achiever, I must do
Right.
something with my time. I thought that this was an interesting one. 80% say that they want to feel inspired. That's one of the reasons why they listen to podcasts. And again, we're going to look into what are the formats that they're looking for. But I think that it's interesting that they say it's one of the reasons, being 80%, but then they say 27% say it's the main reason. So again, women are actionable. They're like, I want to learn or I want to get distracted, but I think it's interesting. All right, the topics. There we go. Here we are. Yesenia, you want to give us like the top 10?
No surprise is true crime at number 1, followed by music, which was a surprise to both of us.
Yeah, I was not expecting that at all.
Yes. Wellness and self-improvement. This is actually one of my personal favorites. Entertainment, celebrity, and gossip, all bundled into one. Then you've got news and information, followed by comedy, love and relationships, food and cooking, politics, and society and culture.
I was so shocked by this because like business is almost like it's such a low there.
At the end.
I guess I'm just like such a nerd because I'm like, I want to know everything about business and tech. And those are so low down to the bottom of the list. I think that's probably like 20. And you and I were talking about the podcast that we consume.
There's so many options on topics that can be crossover with other topics that really opens up an opportunity for you to explore as a podcast content creator. Look at what are your interests, look at the why behind your podcast, and look at what this data and see where within these genres or styles within these genres, what you feel more connected to and where do you feel you can share a voice, share a message, or stories.
Indeed. And at the same time, to do podcast swaps. What are the genres that could be complementary to what you're doing without cannibalizing your growth? All right. So the next one is talking about how many genres are women listening to. I was a little shocked to see that there were 6. And I was like, really? I guess, again, podcasting is like work for me in a way. So I kind of stick to some of them.
It kind of is.
I just want to either I'm learning business or whatever, or I'm researching, or I want to be inspired. There's no middle ground, nothing else. So, and I hear 2 genres. How many genres do you think you listen to?
Oh, I don't know. But I wanted to add a point on when you said researching. As a content creator, as a podcast content creator, it's always good to obviously know and study within your industry, but this is a really good data point to cross-reference to see what audience, understand who your audience is, but once you know that, see what commonalities are within that audience and then these other genres to see what potential collaborations, like you just mentioned, you could potentially work with, or if you're looking into brand partnerships, this is just part of information to feed what other things you can do to expand your podcast brand.
Yeah, and I feel so inspired sometimes listening to podcasts that have nothing to do with what I do and experiment with bringing that format into mine. All right, let's break down the indexing. What are people listening by demographics? Yesenia, take it away.
All right. Oh, yeah, go.
No, I was just going to say we're talking only about the top 3 because there's 5. And again, go to the show notes to get all of the deets.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so age 18 to 34, horror, love and relationships, children, those are the top 3. Age 35 through 54, technology, children's, and true crime. And then age 55 plus, biography / memoir, news / information, philosophy / religion. Those are the top 3. And I just want to point out, because being a Latina content creator, Hispanic, business number 1, horror number 2, and children number 3. So there's a couple of like repetitive themes here, children being one of them. So family topics are one of them. I found that very interesting. And I recently was watching another podcaster, a female podcaster from Spain, and they were talking about the role YouTube and podcasting is playing right now within the Hispanic community, not just within the United States, but like in general, the Spanish market. And they were commenting that podcasting has become a way to expand your education. So wherever places where it might be difficult to have certain resources, podcasting is really bridging that gap. And I think it's brilliant. And I'm just loving the fact that I'm seeing business at the top under the Hispanic content, because it's really just a way for us to just really be able to feel empowered to do something like starting a business, which could be nerve-wracking, but having all these resources readily available is really beneficial and pretty cool.
Yeah, just have more accessibility to information, and that's in different formats for learning. Especially like a lot of the clients that I serve, they're neurodivergent, so they feel like maybe perhaps a podcast is going to be like easier to follow along than traditional learning. All right, Black listeners, what are we looking at?
Another commonality, children's at the number 1, beauty and fashion, that's number 2 altogether, drama number 3, and for the LGBTQ plus community, technology number 1, horror and true crime, which interesting, horror and true crime, they have it as different, as two separate categories. So that's very interesting. So we got children's as a commonality. We've got true crime as top for all these 6 different categories. So it's very interesting to see all of this.
Yeah, it's just, again, and it also shows that there are similarities, but it's so unique. You really need to take time to think about who you're serving and how can you connect the dots. All right, let's talk about emotional connection and shared experience, just like what I was talking about. These numbers shocked me. And I asked the team, I was like, what, when they were doing the webinar, I was like, oh, what shocked you the most? And they're like, oh, 64% say, so almost like, honestly, well over 50% say they're listening to podcasts to cope with or navigate life challenges. And I think that this is interesting because a lot of women do not see themselves represented in traditional media. And so they seek podcasts, and we're going to talk about how women find podcasts. And this is where you need to like triple listen, because that's really important. But I thought this number was really just fascinating. 64% say that they're like not reading somewhere else. They're literally listening to podcasts to learn, okay, how do I do this?
So I wanted to add a note on that, because it kind of goes back to the experience of a podcast, consuming a podcast. Typically, it's just in your ears. So it's very intimate. There is a higher percentage of women consuming content to navigate life's challenges. Just the experience alone, think about that and how you may want to learn or want to navigate a life experience in a way that feels comfortable to you without having to have it on a big screen, or you can just go on a walk and consume this type of content. It's important to know the content that you're creating, but also how people are going to consume it. What is the best way for people to consume your content?
Yes, love that. All right, do you want to give us an overview of like what are the reasons why they're listening to podcasts? What are they trying to cope or better navigate?
Yeah, some of those situations are mental health struggles, stressful work environment, and family issues, which ties quite well with some of the things that we just mentioned, where children, family-related topics are at the top 3.
Okay, the dogs are having a blast over there. Yes, some other topics that were mentioned was a breakup, a death of a loved one, and fertility issues. I think that also like the internet is a place where you can find a lot of more honest content in a lot of ways. That makes sense. All right, so looking into then what are they seeking? In the 60%, we're looking at advice, inspiration, relaxation, and then close to 60% escaping. So these are the reasons why they are seeking help. Yes. So then the top 3 reasons women are interested in female stories and perspectives is to really listen more about self-care, mental health, and friendships. So women over 18 are looking to podcasts to really understand female-led stories about perspectives on self-care, how they're helping themselves through finding ways to cope on their mental health, and then friendships. And again, to say about friendships, there's a lot of loneliness in the US. It's one of the biggest epidemics, especially for young people as well. They're struggling to connect. And so a lot of people, and I had a conversation with someone, even like this was months ago, and I was telling her people only listen to podcasts for two reasons. Either they want to learn something or they want to be entertained. And entertaining is on that side of almost like having a bestie or like having a group of besties that you don't know, but you know everything about their life. And I think that is really interesting. But again, as hosts, we also have benefited from the friendship that can, a bond that can form through podcasting, right?
Absolutely. We met through Instagram, but it was because of the subject matter of podcasts. Definitely is a great way to meet people, meet new friendships. And something that I wanted to point out, going back to some of the reasons of women consuming podcast content, it's that some podcasts are also creating communities, especially if you are looking at a particular podcast or content to navigate a life challenge, let's say, and you're looking for communities for connection, for support, then that also connects to the fact that you're able to make some deeper, more personable connections because of a particular podcast. It's not just about consumption. It's really all the little things that could happen because of that podcast.
Yes, absolutely. And then when we're talking about 43% say that they're listening to podcasts because female perspectives cover topics that are not found in other media, other traditional media. And looking through some more data around the 35 to 31% mark, they talk about how they consume podcasts. They're looking for podcasts that focus on women or they're of their own age, so topics that are pertinent to the age that they're at, the time of their life they're at. And they also say 34% that women who consume podcasts wish there were more podcasts focused on female opinions and perspectives. So if you're thinking about a second podcast, go ahead, do it. Lean in. And then 31% say that they seek out more podcasts hosted or produced by women specifically. We're going to be delving into those right now. So here, the Edison team said that when they were looking at this data, there was like very clear that women in general do say that they are likely to consume podcasts. They are hosted by women or produced by women. And so they found the biggest number exclusively, people saying that the age bracket that said, I exclusively listen to podcasts, they are both hosted and produced by women. It was the biggest percentage, 14%. And then they also said that 40% were most of the podcasts that they listened to. I personally thought that, again, that data was like coming down because also there's this like idea that women want to listen to more stories by women because they have this idea, like their rebellious spirit of, I want to create and support more women. And I feel like there's the 54, and again, this is the talking from experience, the clients that I serve, sometimes the 55 plus struggles to connect because maybe when they went into the market, they really had a hard time. They were breaking through glass ceilings and they couldn't really collaborate. And I feel like there's a lot of clients that I do ask, hey, like what shows do you consume? And a lot of them still say the majority is male dominated. So here's some homework for everybody. Like audit the number of podcasts that you're listening to. Are there the diverse audience, like hosts? Are they just white hosts? Are they just men, right? What are you listening? Are you making sure that you have a breadth of variety of content? Are you listening to more female perspectives? Really ask yourself, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. And if you're looking at creating content for your podcast and you're finding yourself attracted to a particular type of genre or format, for example, I love a lot of tech content. I'm a tech nerd, but most of this content is produced by men. So if that's, I'm going to use that as the example, if that's the thing that you want to create, do you want to then break that tradition of it being mostly male dominated and then put a female face in front of it?
Yes, absolutely. Just a lot to consider on this episode, like a lot of takeaways. But would you mind sharing some of the reasons why women share that they enjoy listening or watching female podcast hosts?
Yeah, so some of those are that they can relate to stories from female podcast hosts. 33%. Do you want me to say percentage or?
Maybe just the top three, so we're not giving away too much.
Okay, so 33% that indicated that it's the main reason. So it would be you can relate to stories from female podcast hosts. And then 30% indicated that female podcast hosts talk about and explain complicated or underrepresented topics. 29% indicated female podcast hosts consider multiple viewpoints.
Yes. So definitely thinking about like how is, again, a competitive analysis. Listen, it can be as simple as like just listening to other women are doing it. And if they're not doing it, you can be the person that represents. All right, let's talk briefly about family experiences. 25%, so a quarter of women say that if they listen to podcasts, they have children under the age of 18 that they consume podcasts with. Oh, sorry.
And
That's not what I meant to say. They do have children. There you go. They do have children and they listen to or watch podcasts. There you go.
And 21% of women monthly podcast consumers, 18 or more, with children under the age of 18, listen to or watch podcasts with their children. So how it's very interesting to see how that is then even broken down even more. So definitely family is at the top of a lot of these things that we're seeing.
Yes. And then when they're talking about family podcast consumption, motivations and benefits, the top benefit, 70%, they say that it was to bond with their children, the listening to podcasts to connect with their children. And then 60% said, 63, whatever. They said that they had shared interests. And one of the hosts was talking about how she's now using this time to connect with her daughter because they're co-listening. They're listening to the same show and then they can talk about it. And so that this is such a great way to connect and to get educated. They said over 50% say that to expose their children to educational content. And again, so many podcasts can spark conversations that you've been struggling to have with your children. You can debate some of those. I think that's, again, I don't have children. Yesenia doesn't have children either. So some of them is just us guessing or like looking through the industry and what has been said. But I think that is really interesting that podcasting can be really a vehicle for change and a vehicle to connection to people. And so talking about like how much people are thinking about these statements, they agreed that podcasts let the children use their imagination. And what I thought it was interesting that they were talking about also not having access to screens. That was something that I was like, oh my God, yes, you touched almost on that earlier, I think. They also said that podcasts are fun for the whole family because, again, you have a shared experience. And they said that the last was podcasts are a great way to entertain children without screens. So that was the last one that came.
Like you mentioned, I don't have kids. I have a niece and a nephew. Whenever I'm visiting or they're visiting me, I'm always trying to find ways to avoid screen time. One thing that I love enjoying doing is hiking. I figure this is me thinking, if you're planning a family outing and younger kids might feel like, oh, I'm getting bored from a 10-minute ride, having these non-screen time content like podcasts could be a really good conversation starter, depending obviously on the age of the kids and the interest, but it's just another way to interact as a family.
Yes, for sure. Especially time that normally would be like, oh, everybody's listening to music or whatever. So that makes sense.
Right.
All right. Last section that you definitely want to listen to. It's engagement and monetization. Let's talk about how are women finding out about podcasts. Yesenia, tell us.
Number one, social media posts. And actually this has a 10-point increase since 2022, so not far. And then behind it is recommendations from friends and family.
Yeah. And
so that word of mouth. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
and I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that's the number one reason. Like in 2022, they said that recommendations from friends and family were the number one reason that they found shows. So this is why it's super important to create more content that attracts new audiences. I'm sorry, whether you're using video for clips from your video podcast or your something that I do a lot is just talking directly to the audience, building that connection on social media is going to be more important than ever to continue to tag more people along to bring that audience organically.
Just a quick note that from, I think it was a State of Podcasting or State of Video Podcasting, I can't remember, this recent study that was shown at Podcast Movement is that they include YouTube under social and recommendations from friends. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to be on every single social platform. Just think about where your audience is, where they're engaging, and then double down on that social media strategy. And then obviously recommendations for friends and family, that's always a plus.
Yes, absolutely. All right, number 3.
Searching the internet. So SEO or podcast search optimization. Make sure that you're using strong keywords whenever you're naming your things, your content, and all the assets that you're creating for your podcast. And then others are the services you use to listen to or watch podcasts. So what platforms are you using to consume podcasts? I love YouTube. So just look at how the algorithm on YouTube is recommending content to you. And that's one of the ways that people are finding about podcasts. hearing about them on another podcast. So this is great if you're thinking of cross marketing or guesting on another podcast.
Absolutely. All right. There's a few more. So for that, you can just look at the study, because otherwise it's going to get super, super big.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then we're going to through the discovery source, because it changes where people are listening to. We're going to fly through this. So there's a difference on how people are finding podcasts. And before they're 34, it's influencers, celebrities, publications, best of year lists, and social media. This is where, again, the online world, right? If you haven't considered creating anything that is like the best of, or submitting a podcast to awards, you should, especially if you're like local, like nobody's going to show up at your doorstep to promote your podcast. You have to do some of the legwork. So get creative. And then from 35 to 54, they find podcasts through ads on other audio programs, publications, and best of years and lists. And then AM, FM radio stations made me laugh, especially the AM.
Same.
And then over 55, they listen to on other audio program hosts, seeing or hearing about it on TV, and then AM or FM radio stations. For Black listeners, female listeners, they say influencers and celebrities come first, seeing or hearing it on TV, AM and FM radio stations. For the Hispanic community, publications, best of your lists, and then other audio podcast hosts, AM, FM radio stations, and then LGBTQ plus other audio program hosts, hearing from another podcast, and ads on other audio programs. So again, a lot of inspiration here. And then into another section that I thought was interesting on what are people actually doing? Right? 65% said that they actually did something beyond listening. So this is where the call to action is super important. So they say that the 53% say that they followed a podcast or a podcast host on social media. So something that I was talking about earlier, they do take action. So again, I tell you to go on Instagram. Many of you are, because you want to check what's going on. And then number 2, signed up for a newsletter from a podcast. You have to start an email newsletter. Like, it's the number 2 reason people will sign up, and there's so much opportunity for monetization there. Number 3,
they should check out your newsletter.
There you go. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to do a plug here. And I do have a newsletter guide. And actually, I'm feeling good. And if you go to the show notes of this specific episode, you actually can get it for the price of the early bird pricing that is no longer available. So you can get it for $19 and just learn about the 5 different formats you can use to start a newsletter, because it feels scary. It feels like, what the hell do you talk about? So go and get it. Thank you for doing the plug for me, Yesenia.
Sure.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Going through the next one. And then number 3 is purchase merchandise from a podcast. So again, if you got that merch, that sexy merch people are going to buy, pay the subscription fee to access early or exclusive content from a podcast. So if you want to start subscriptions, basically 15% said they would, and then attended a virtual event hosted by a podcast, joined a podcast fan club, attended a live show or event hosted by a podcast, and donated or given money to a podcast. And now we're going to look at the next one. So Yesenia, you want to give us the top 3?
Sure. So this one is about, as a result of hearing an advertisement or sponsorship on a podcast, have you ever? And then you've got 75% have done any of these as a result of hearing an ad or sponsorship on a podcast. So number 1 is listened to or watched another podcast. Number 2, gathered more information about a company or product. And number 3, recommended a product to a friend or a family member. And this is very consistent has been quite consistent in various studies over the past few years. So definitely podcast consumers are very engaged audience. Yes. And they're willing to, and they're not just engaged, that they're also they're ready to take action.
They are. And so again, thinking about what are those calls to action? What is the path of the listener? Do you have the links? Why are they not clicking? It's time to make an audit. All right, going from the intention all the way to the actual purchase. The study did reveal that knowing that a brand advertises on podcasts hosted or produced by women makes women more likely to consider. 45% say that they consider buying a product that was advertised on a podcast. Recommend 33% and actually spend 22%. Under a fourth say that they actually spend. Knowing that other campaigns don't convert as much, this is really good numbers when we hear this. And again, the more aligned you make that product to the podcast, the purpose of the podcast, and the habits and the need of your audience, the better it will convert. And then last but not least, I thought it was really interesting because I always wonder, like, from the top 25 shows that women listen to normally, like, how many are actually hosted by women? What is the percentage? And I thought that it was like really interesting, 48%. Because maybe 3 years ago, just saying, I remember looking at the data and it was like just men.
Yeah.
And now you have, for instance, like the Mel Robbins podcast, the Good Hang with Amy Poehler, like those two shows, again, they're like, one is super inspiring, super entertaining as well. And the other one is just pure hangout. It's just like, just entertainment, like nothing more than just that. So 48% to have this percentage of the top shows being women representing the top 25%. I thought it was like, yes. So there is more hope and exciting news on looking through the data. I think that's it for me. What's your 2 cents that you gotta recommend to our audience after listening to all of this from this report?
I would say first, look at your data. If this is a lot of information, so what can you do? What can you implement? It's a lot. So look at your data and pick one thing that you can implement based on what you've seen in this report. Maybe you are about to launch, so maybe you use this report as base data point to know, okay, maybe this topic or this genre really is thriving. So maybe that could be your address, or maybe you're seeing a gap in something in this data, and then that could be your entryway into podcasting. Definitely 2 options that you can do, whether you're starting out or whether you are already a podcaster and then you are looking to find ways to expand your podcast brand.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. You did it in such a seamless way. All right, okay. I didn't even think of mine, to be honest. Oh my God.
What about you, Anna?
Talking about this whole thing so far, I thought maybe what my number one thing can be, look at your data, right? But really look at the platform that is consumed by the most, right? And so I see a lot of people have the audio only podcast platform and YouTube, and they're not combining the data. And you have to start looking because, for instance, for me, there's a bigger male audience on YouTube, for instance, and Spotify than on Apple Podcasts for me. So that's really interesting. Again, where are the biggest numbers? And figure out, like, maybe you'll be surprised once you start adding up the data. And at the same time, I think that it's time to do more collaboration with other women. Like, this was the perfect example of like us collaborating in this topic that both of us are experts in. We have to stop being so territorial or just being afraid of, oh, what's that going to say? They just ask and just do it and test it and see how it feels. And so test new things. It may be the format you love. And when we cross bridges, organic growth is one of the best ways, but also feels like it's the easiest to grow, especially bringing someone who can tap onto their audience and share that content as well. A great way to listen to this episode and feel like, okay, maybe I can do it. So, all right. Yesenia, thank you so much for being on the show. This was like a blast. Two nerds.
Yeah. I always enjoy being on your podcast.
Oh, thank you. I love having you because it's like always easy. So if people want to connect with you, where can they go?
They can check out my content on YouTube at Focus and Bloom, or on Instagram, Focus and Bloom Studios, and my new podcast, Creative Made. It's also on YouTube, and it's audio only. So if you're doubting the audio only experience on YouTube, you can do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as always, I invite you to just create imperfect content that moves you forward. And for anything that we mentioned in this episode, go and check the show notes because we have all the resources that you need right there. And so talk to us on Instagram and we'll cheer you on. All right. Have a great day. And I'll find you in the next episode.